Hey, Math 85 students, we are working on section 5.4, which is solving equations that involve decimals. So, the same procedure to solve other types of equations is what we'll use to solve equations that have decimals in them. First, let's review what does it mean to find a solution? Like, what is a solution to an equation? So, a solution to an equation is a value that you can substitute for the variable, which turns the equation into a true statement. So here I have the equation x minus 0.7 equals 1.5. And let's determine if each one of these values for x is a solution to the equation. So let's try x equals 1. Is that a solution? We'll replace x here with 1. 1 minus 0.7, and then we have to ask ourselves, is that equal to 1.5? So let's do the subtraction. 1 minus 0.7, this is 1.0 minus 0.7. So I'll have to regroup here. 10 minus 7 is 3, so I get 3 in the tens place. 0.3, is that equal to 1.5? It is not, so I'll say that no. X equals 1 is not a solution. Let's look at x equals negative 0.8. So if I replace x with negative 0.8 and then I subtract 0.7, do I get 1.5? I can even tell just by looking at it that I won't, because these two negatives are going to add up to a negative number. Either way, two negatives. Remember, subtraction can be written as plus a negative. So I'm adding two negative numbers here. So I know that I'm going to have to add the absolute values together. 0.8 plus 0.7 is 1.5. And the two numbers are negative, so my answer will be negative 1.5. And is that equal to 1.5? The answer is no, they're not equal. So no, negative 0.8 is not a solution. Let's try this one, x equals 2.2. If I replace the variable with this value, 2.2 minus 0.7, and then you have to ask if that's equal to 1.5. Let's do the subtraction. 2.2 minus 0.7. Regrouping here, 12 minus 7 is 5. 1 minus 0 is 1. Ooh, so I indeed get here that the left-hand side evaluates to 1.5, and that's equal to the right-hand side. So yes, x equals 2.2 is a solution to that equation. So here's how we go to check to see if values are solutions to equations. Now let's go ahead and solve each one of these equations. The trick is always to try to isolate the variable, that is, get the variable by itself on one side of the equation. Also, it's helpful to know what is the operation that you're trying to undo to get the variable by itself. So y plus 2.3 equals negative 4.7. To get y by itself here, I need to undo the operation that connects these two these two values, 2.3 and y. The operation here is addition. So to undo addition, I've got to apply subtraction. So I will subtract this value from both sides. Always remember that the equal sign kind of separates your equation into two halves. There's the left-hand side and the right-hand side. All right, so y plus 2.3 minus 2.3, that 2 plus 2.3 minus 2.3, that adds to 0, so that will go away. I'm left with y by itself on the left. And on the right-hand side, let's see, I need to do negative 4.7 minus 2.3. So remember, this is the same as like plus a negative 2.3. Because both of the numbers are negative, I can just go ahead and add the absolute values together and then just make my answer negative. So 7 plus 3 is 10. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. 7.0 negative, and the answer will be negative. Let me just simplify what I have here, because 7.0 is the same as 7. So my answer is negative 7. Let's do the next one. Negative 4.8 equals 0.8n. Why don't you pause the video and try to work this one on your own. All right. So here is where I'd like to undo whatever operation is connecting the 0.8 to the n. And I find out what that operation is and then undo it. So I've got 0.8n. The operation here is multiplication because when you see a number right next to a variable, it's like understood that you're multiplying. So how do we undo multiplication? We have to perform division. Division to both sides by that number. So divide this side by 0.8 and divide the other side by 0.8. All right, so on the right-hand side, that's exactly what I want because, see, you've got a common factor of 0.8 in the numerator and denominator. You can divide those out. So I'm left with n on the right-hand side. And now here on the left-hand side, you're going to have to do this division. Now, for these problems on your homework, you can use your calculator, but I don't want you to use your calculator on all of the problems. Maybe do half with, half without. This one I'll perform by hand so that I keep my skills sharp. So I'm going to do, first of all, negative divided by positive. I know that my answer will be negative. And now I'm going to perform 4.8 divided by 0.8. Then I should remember that to divide with decimals, you want your divisor always to be a whole number. So I'll move my decimal point to the right one place in both the numerator and denominator. Dividend and divisor. So this really is 48 divided by 8. 8 goes into 48 6 times. So n equals a negative 6. Let's try the next two problems. And again, I urge you to pause the video so that you can try these on your own and check your answers after. Got p over negative 1.8 equals negative 6.5. So what's the operation? I'm trying to get p by itself. The operation that connects the p to the negative 1.8 here is division. So in order to undo this division, I'll perform multiplication. So I'll multiply both sides. So this side by negative 1.8 and this side by negative 1.8. Noticing here that these values are going to cancel out because really multiplying by negative 1.8 is like multiplying by negative 1.8 over 1. So really you can divide out that common factor on the left-hand side there. All right, so what I have left on the left, and again, let me just divide this in my two sides. If p on the left equals, and now I just have to do this multiplication. Remember, negative times negative will be positive. So I'll just do the multiplication without worrying about the negative signs. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. Plus 4 is 52. All right, moving over to the 1, I should put in a 0 placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 6, 6. And then we add everything together. All right, I've got one place after the decimal in this number, one place there, so I should have altogether 2 places after the decimal in my answer. And I don't have to write that trailing 0. So p equals 11.7. All right, last problem. Again, please attempt it on your own. Pause the video and then check your answer. Negative 1.7c equals 8.5. So let me tell you that this problem actually gives people a lot of issues because of this negative. A lot of people want to just like add the 1.7 because you see that negative sign. But it's important to look a little bit closer and ask yourself the same question every time. If we're trying to get c by itself, what operation is combining the negative 1.7 and the c? That operation is multiplication. So we have to undo that multiplication to get c by itself. So I'll undo the multiplication by dividing both sides by that number, negative 1.7. Okay, so here I've got that common factor that can be divided out. I'm left with C on the left-hand side. And now this one is one that's a little annoying to do by hand. So this one I will use my calculator for. 8.5 divided by negative 1.7, which gives me negative 5. And if you're worried at all that you did the calculation incorrectly, you can always check by plugging this value in for the variable. So if I have negative 1.7 times negative 5, should end up with the right-hand side. Oh. Negative 1.7 times negative 5 should end up with the right-hand side of the equation there, which is 8.5. Great. All right, so make sure you try all of these problems in section 5.4. Again, my suggestion would be most of them try to do without the calculator so that you can practice all of your calculations. And some of them, especially if you've got like a double digit division or divisor, maybe you can use your calculator for those.